Now, you may have noticed the King's been in the news a lot, not least because he gave his King's speech yesterday. It was the second speech he gave. And on top of that, what made the news was the return of Sarah Ferguson, Prince Andrew's former wife, who was gracing her presence walking to church, which might just sound like not an unreasonable thing to do on a Sunday afternoon, but of course she was accompanied by the royal family, she was approved, she was sanctioned back into the family. I think it's time to dig into what was going on here, and of course I'm very pleased to welcome Rupert Bell, talkTV's royal correspondent. Rupert, good morning to you.
Morning, Nick.
I hope you had a very good Christmas old chat, and you were no doubt watching and listening, first of all, watching to the King's speech and probably keeping an eye on Sandringham as well at the church, weren't you? Interesting day.
Yes, it always is a day where we get people watching and work out the sort of dynamics of the royal family. Clearly, what you saw was the sort of extended family all coming together for the Christmas festivities. As you say, Sarah Ferguson, who hasn't been seen in a public role at Christmas at Sandringham, I think, since the early 90s. So it is significant. But I think she also plays, as they live, her and her former husband live under the same roof, I think she is also seen as a positive influence in his life. And clearly he's got a lot going on at the moment that is making him, at times within the royal family, persona non grata. But clearly yesterday all sort of divisions were put aside, and he was out on the walk to the church, and there was lots of happy scenes of the family enjoying themselves. Of course, notable absentee, Meghan and Harry still over in California, didn't get an invitation. But overall, you just saw that it was a family going to have a pretty good day at Sandringham.
Let me ask you about this, because it kind of links with the King's speech a little bit, because he did talk about the importance of family and coming together on Christmas Day. And some people are linking the two things, that he's demonstrated that by having Sarah Ferguson, who's obviously very important, mother to the princesses, and as you say, an influence on, a positive influence, we hope, on Prince Andrew. But it was in stark contrast, really, to Harry and Meghan in that sense, wasn't it? He didn't mention any members of his family, but in a way she accentuated, once again, they're nothing to do with the family in these formal occasions.
Absolutely. When you see you've got them all coming together, sort of, even the Queen's family were there, the grandchildren, and her children. So it was a big coming together, and really emphasising what the King is trying to say, families get on with it. Very prominent, though, that the working royals are sort of seen at the front. None of this is done just off the cuff. Putting, he goes first, then the Prince and Princess of Wales were very prominent. The Princess Royal and her husband were very prominent. It's clearly significant the way it is staged, managed. But more importantly, what he then goes on to say in the King's speech, then you see the sort of informality, sort of staged managed at Sandringham, but then coming to the King's speech, that was very much a sort of message to try and get people to come together. And it was very clever that he mentioned the sort of environment, but not in an overtly political way. He said, we as a whole have to treasure this creation, i.e. this creation being the earth.
Rupert, I'll ask you on that point. No one's surprised how passionate he is about it, but when I was talking about this subject, when the speech was speculation on, what was it, Sunday now, lots of people made their view clear. Even one very respected journalist said, he should just keep his nose out of it. Even mentioning it at a time it's so controversial, I still think he's walking a very, very fine line. He might get away with it at some other events when he's going to COP with the government's blessing, but to do it in the Queen's speech and pick up on something that is a political issue, surely he's pushing the boundaries of constitutional behaviour.
I think you have to look at the way it was phrased. It was very general. And actually, let's be honest, he's saying, you're not saying how we go about it. He's just saying from a religious point of view, the creation, he's bringing on all faiths as well. He does make reference, and even if you weren't not a person of faith. He referenced, so he's trying to be all-inclusive. And I suppose, you know, there's a lot going on, the conflicts going on, so he's having to navigate his way through. You can't, you know, he has always been passionate about the environment, but actually just saying that we as a race, I suppose, have to look after this creation. How political is that? It seems to me just fairly sort of bland. There was nothing that you thought, well, you could say, well, he's gone really too far, because actually there was a lot. It was basically a very general sort of speech wishing that things could come together, and we have got to be mindful of what's going on. And with the conflicts going on as well in Ukraine and in the Middle East as well, you know, trying to make sure that we sort of, the message of peace, I suppose, and positivity was what he was trying to get over. But it's a very difficult area for him to navigate.
Well, he chose to navigate that. It seems to have paid off, because all the papers are talking about his call for peace. I mean, absolutely nothing wrong with anyone, least of all the king, talking about peace. I suppose there's part of me, though, that thinks, how inspirational is that? Because it's about as far a divorce from reality than you can ever imagine. I almost felt like, well, yes, I love the sentiment, but goodness me, this is la-la fairyland. I mean, what was his purpose here?
I think this is the problem for the king. He can't do anything but, as you put it, in inverted commas, have sort of blandishments, but because he is not supposed to have a political role. So whatever he feels, he's got to couch in a way that seems positive and makes sense. But actually, in the end, you don't say a lot, because everything that he said was a positive, in that it all made perfect sense. We all should try and sort of live and look after each other as we would ourselves. These are all sort of messages of faith, which he was trying to get over. But actually saying anything that we should do, well, once he does that, then he puts himself in the political area. And that's why these speeches are very difficult to get right. And I'm sure that he writes it, but it would have been poured over by his advisors to make sure that he didn't overstep the mark. And that's always the typical thing.
Rupert, he's done 2 now. Do you think he's enhanced his reputation yesterday? Did you feel it was a good speech? I mean, my wife's comment to me was, my goodness, that's so short. I mean, best speeches are short, to be fair.
Yes, 5 minutes. I mean, he probably knows that if he suddenly takes up 10 minutes of people's time, he might be overstepping the mark. And that's the thing. Try and get your message over quickly, a positive one, show a few pictures, and then move on. I think what we're seeing is the way the day worked yesterday was the king able to enjoy it and showing that he's sort of master of all he surveys as far as his family is concerned, and he's got an open approach. But actually, when it comes to the matter of the sort of formal side, of which the king's speech is very much part of his well, it is the tradition of Christmas, he has to make sure that he sets the tone right. So overall, I think over a year into his reign now, he's beginning to stamp his mark, and he's understanding that he can't go too far. So I think hopefully he thinks he probably feels right. We've done all right.
Okay.
And, we kick on.
A brief one on this. End of term report, end of the year. What's he get out of 10?
Well, you're never going to give anyone 10.
No.
There's always room for improvement. I think he probably would say it's been a 7 out of 10 year. There are issues within the royal family that are causing him some headaches. Some are soap opera, one obviously with his younger brother. But overall, I think he's setting the tone in a pretty good way. So he gets a B, I think, in terms rather than an A.
That's about the mark I managed in most cases. So I stand with Charles on that one.